Welcome to part 1 of ranking every position 4 hero in the game. Last time we finished ranking all the carries in the game, so if you missed that or want to check that out, that's going to be linked as the first thing in the description. The categories that we're going to be ranking on today are as follows. Lane strength, ability to set up kills, how strong they are when they're snowballing, how strong they are when they're behind, team utility, and then late game usefulness. And just a reminder, this list isn't looking at patch-specific strengths, it's more so looking at heroes' kits as a whole and how they do in general.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Bounty is an interesting position 4 to start out with, since the way he plays the game is a good bit different than the conventional soft support. To start off today's list, Bounty is going to score a 3 when looking at lane strength. Having decent damage and higher HP and armor than the average support makes him have a good base here. Bounty doesn't have a ton of pressure to offer in terms of damage, but Janata is a very effective ability at scrapping with the enemy carry as they go for last hits, especially since it doesn't aggro creeps and that can put you in very advantageous positions. Shuriken is also okay damage, and having access to a mini-stun is never a bad thing. This may come as a surprise, but Bounty only scores a 2 when we're measuring his ability to set up kills. Now, don't get me wrong, between Invis and Track, his ability to scout and locate kills is phenomenal, but he lacks the initiation, lockdown, or damage to really set up the kills. If you are far ahead on Bounty, you can get to this point where you have great damage, but most of the games you're not going to have it. Bounty gets the first 5 of the list when we talk about his snowball strength. Track alone would make this hero get a 5 in this category. It can turn random pickoffs into huge boosts for team net worth, and can help everyone get to an extra item that they normally wouldn't have gotten to. That stacked on top of the early gold steal from Janata makes Bounty have the potential to get very farmed without having to hit any creeps. Alongside that, there are some great expensive items that position 4 Bounty loves to buy, like Ag Scepter, Lotus, Octarine, and Wraith Pack. For strength while underfarmed, Bounty's going to get a 2. After all I've already said here, it's going to be pretty clear that this is a support that really focuses on having money, so if you fall short of that goal, you're going to struggle a bit. All of your abilities just kind of fall a bit short when you're behind. Invis is kind of hard to scout with when the enemy has map control and can freely sentry wherever they want. Shuriken damage is a bit underwhelming going into the mid game. You'll never be able to walk up to somebody and just hit them with Janata, and Track doesn't do all that much to actually help you get the kills. It rather just is a bonus on top when you do actually secure kills. So if you're behind and your team needs more damage, you can't really offer that with this spell. For utility, Bounty's going to score a 3. Now I'm not going to count the bonus gold from Track here because that fits more into the snowball strength category, but the vision it gives is still extremely useful. That plus the scouting you were able to do, and the fact that you have a spell that can cancel TPs or channeling spells on such a short cooldown is really nice to have. Although all these things are pretty decent, none are game-changing or that high impact on their own, which is why he doesn't get any higher than a 3 here. Bounty's usefulness in the late game scores a 3. He maintains all of his utility going into the late game and has enough items that he likes to build to be useful in pretty much any matchup. But once again, he doesn't have any big abilities that can really help him close out games. In total, Bounty scores an 18 and ends up in our C tier.
Some assembly required.
This might be the most feast or famine hero we take a look at on this list. When talking about lane, Clock scores a 3, so we're starting off very hit or miss. Some lanes Clock can completely dominate, some he can just scrape by, and it really comes down to how well the opposing heroes can deal with battery assault and cogs. If you're in a lane where getting on top of somebody with battery assault on will result in you killing them, you can almost guarantee a 1 lane. On the other side, if you're laning against high mobility or stun heroes, you're going to really struggle. His ability to set up kills is going to be a 5. There should be no real need for an explanation here. This hero's kit is designed to initiate and lock down kills. Hook into cogs can completely doom low mobility heroes, whereas Hook into cogs pushback offers a long CC chain that can set up kills for even the most slippery enemies. For snowball strength, Clock's going to get a 3. This is another hit or miss category. I'm sure we've all seen games where Clockwerk can just at any moment solo kill anyone in the game, but there's also games where no matter how farmed Clock is, he struggles just based on how many saves the enemy has and how often they stay grouped. While underfarmed, Clock scores another 3. If this is the state you're in on this hero, your job basically comes down to locking down 1 or 2 targets before dying, and there's not anything else that you're going to be able to do most of the time. Now with that being said, this is still a very effective use of a position 4, it's just a bit one note. For utility, we're going to give Clock a 4. Just looking back on everything I've talked about already, should put a pretty good picture of how this ranking came to be. His initiation and lockdown is just amazing, and cogs can also be amazing at disrupting fights and cutting off pursuing enemies. The limiting factor here, once again, is how matchup dependent most of these tools are, but in the majority of cases, you're going to be able to have big impact. For late game usefulness, Clock's going to get a 4. Late into the game, when BKBs start getting low on cores, BKB piercing disables becomes some of the most important spells in the game. Clock's Hook is not only a BKB piercing spell, but it also has ridiculous range. Unfortunately, by this time in the game, almost every enemy will have some way of dealing with Cog. In total, Clock scores a 22 and lands in our A tier.
What'd you say, Jix? Ready to play?
Willow might get a bad rap because she's in a rough patch right now, but her kit is still extremely good in this role. Let's start Willow out with a 3 for lane strength. Great base attack speed and Shadow Realm make you fantastic for trading and harassing. Brambles can be a fantastic kill tool, but it relies on either fighting in tight areas or a setup stun to be consistent. Because of her long cooldowns, you really want to get a lot of value out of each cast of her spells, but it is pretty difficult to do without specific circumstances. For ability to set up kills, Willow's going to get a 3. Between Brambles and Cursed Crown, you can really have some good initiation. If you can get Crown to pop and then follow it up with Brambles, you're going to be in great shape for most kills. But there's a reason that this hero is only a 3 in this, and that's because of the delay and uncertainty of both of these spells. You have to hope the enemy doesn't have any way of escaping from danger or dispelling themselves before the Crown pops. Shard and Yule's both make the setup a lot easier, but still not completely consistent. Willow's Snowball Strength is going to be a 4. This may be the position 4 with the most solo kill potential if she finds her way into some money. There's been a significant amount of time since this hero has come out where Blink and Yule's were enough to let you solo kill even enemy carries. I think when looking at pickoffs, this is the best position 4 in this category, but unfortunately, if the enemy team is grouped up, you lose almost all of this advantage. In teamfights, unless you fully commit to offensive items like Ag Scepter, you're not going to do much more than an underfarmed Willow would. Speaking of which, while underfarmed, Willow's going to score a 4. All of your spells are very effective whether or not you have gold. That stacked on top of you having a built-in defensive tool in Shadow Realm makes this hero good when playing from behind. The thing holding her back here is how difficult it can be to use Bedlam when you're behind. You won't have many good ways of getting on top of enemies quickly, and you're too squishy to live in the front lines for any long amount of time. Even if you do use Shadow Realm to gap close, you're going to die as soon as it ends. For utility, Willow gets a 4. All of her tools are fantastic, but once again, unreliable. Brambles are a great stun and area denial tool, but somewhat relies on enemies messing up. Crown is an incredibly powerful AoE stun, but does nothing against heroes that have dispels. And the Fear version of her ult has a long enough casting time to cause some awkward situations where you either get the cast cancelled or don't hit as many enemies as you would want to. But this Fear is still probably the most underrated ability on this hero. It's extremely good offensively to make high mobility heroes not able to use their escape spells, and great defensively to make groups of oncoming enemies run away from your team. For late game usefulness, Willow's going to get a 3. As more items like BKB, Yule's, Lotus, and Manta come online, your lockdown becomes less and less strong. But with that being said, Fear continues to retain its usefulness late into the game. On top of that, in elongated fights you will become very strong, since if you can get multiple rounds of spells off, most enemies won't have the tools to deal with the second Crown or Bramble. In total, Willow scores a 21 and ends up at the very top of B tier.
The Dawn Star rises!
This, in my opinion, is the most pub-stompy 4 hero there is. Dawn is easily going to get a 5 when looking at her lane strength. Level 1 Hammer and Starbreaker is enough for you to nearly solo kill most opposing heroes, and that's assuming you're position 3 when AFK to make some burritos or something. Literally any help from position 3 means that you will consistently have kill threat at any point in the lane. Dawn's ability to set up kills is a 4. Once again, Starbreaker and Hammer gives you all the tools that you could ever want to kill most heroes in the game. You do have a slight problem against high mobility heroes like Storm or AM, but with the setup stun, you can still easily kill them. Your ult is also extremely good at letting you connect on any gank and adds another stun to your kit. The thing keeping Dawn from getting a 5 here is the fact that there will be many games where you want to kind of use your ult to connect on the ganks instead of setting them up yourself, which means that you're going to have to rely on teammates to set up kills, which isn't that consistent. Her Snowball Strength is going to be a 4. This is a hero that often sees play as a core, so it's not too shocking that if she finds herself with some extra gold early on, she can transition into a semi-core and be a complete menace. The only downside to this is the normal support Dawn build is very far from the core Dawn build, so you have to kind of commit pretty early on if you want to start building core items, which can end up biting you if it doesn't work out. While underfarmed, Dawn's going to score a 3. You lose a lot of the offensive strength when you are behind in levels or gold on this hero, and many times you will find yourself dying early in fights since you still need to run in and be aggressive even if you're behind. On the flip side, there are builds that can make your ult extremely useful, which don't require a lot of gold to come online. And your slow is, no matter what, going to be strong and doesn't require any items to work well. For utility, Dawn's going to score a 4. You have pretty much everything you could possibly want here, but you are still lacking one key thing. The absence of a guaranteed stun really hurts Dawn. With your shard, you do get close, but the range is still lacking. And the reason I'm only focusing on the negatives here is because in every other aspect of her kit, Dawn is pretty much flawless. For late game, Dawn's usefulness is going to score a 5. Your ult only really continues to get stronger as the game goes on, and there's not really a point where you really run out of items to buy like you do on some other supports. There's an endless amount of luxury items that are just extremely valuable on this hero. Your late game talents are also very powerful. This whole package just makes Dawn scale however late the game goes. In total, Dawn scores a 25 and is our first position 4 in the S tier.
Yes!
All paths are one.
Here is a position 4 that is very underrepresented in most pub brackets due to its mechanical skill requirements, but it shouldn't be understated how powerful this hero can be in any bracket. Earth Spirit's lane is a bit tough to rank because although I'm not looking at patch-specific strengths for these rankings, depending on the meta, this rank will shift a lot. In a gank-heavy meta, Earth Spirit is maybe the best ganking 4 in the game, but in metas where the position 4 typically stays in the lane, Earth Spirit tends to struggle. Overall, I'll rank him at a 3 in this category, but just remember that he's likely either a 2 or a 5 during any given patch. Earth Spirit's ability to set up kills will net him a 5. Rolling Boulder is such a long range and low cooldown initiation tool, and it's pretty much unmatched by any other position 4 spell. And then even after you roll, you have great follow-up with either kick or silence, and on top of that, between your ult and urn or vessel, you have great damage too. This is a 4 that is so good at ganking that if you're doing anything besides hunting heroes, you're probably doing something wrong. Earth Spirit's going to get a 3 for Snowball Strength. You'll never really be able to transform into a core, even if your ganks all go perfectly. More likely, you'll just become very tanky and be able to live for a long enough time in fights to get multiple rounds of spells off. And this is a very valuable thing to have on this hero, just its peak impact falls a bit short of some of the other heroes that we're looking at. When underfarmed, Earth Spirit's going to get a 2. No matter the level of farm, ES still has the same game plan in fights. You still have to roll in, drop spells, but when you're underfarmed, that's going to be pretty much all you can do before you just get blown up. Your spells are still useful, but only getting 1 round off isn't all that great. For utility, Earth Spirit's going to get a 4. Once again, we're lacking a guaranteed stun, but other than that, he's got most of his bases covered. Fantastic low cooldown initiation, massive fight disruption with AoE damage, multi-target silences, and repositioning, and on top of all that, being a fantastic foolproof ganking support makes ES great for utility. When looking at the late game, ES gets a 3. It's hard for this hero to keep up in farm going into the late game, and your spells don't scale quite as well as some of the other supports. But even in the late game, your initiation and repositioning are just things that can't be ignored. In total, Earth Spirit scores a 20, which puts him in our B tier.
Time to shake things up and see where they settle.
Now onto my personal favorite hero in the entire game. For lane, Earthshaker's going to get a 2. This really is the weakest point for Shaker. Your level 1 and 2 are extremely weak, and the only real things that you can do here are block waves with Fissure, try to set up kills with Fissure if you have an exceptionally strong position 3, or just deny creeps with Enchant Totem. Now none of these things are bad, but compared to other 4s, you are just very limited in what you can do at this point. Shaker's ability to set up kills is going to be a 4. Your long range hard CC is just the perfect spell to start engagements, and then whether you go for Shard or Blink, you have great follow-up to your own stuns with more stuns. Without a Blink, maybe this hero is a bit closer to a 3, but the amount of stun that you have when you do have the Blink is just crazy. There's not any non-channel spell in the game that can lock down for as long as a Shaker can, and that is a very big deal. But you still have to look at the downside of Shaker, which is his lack of innate mobility, which is hard to deal with before you get that Shard or the Blink. Shaker's going to get a 3 when we look at his Snowball Strength. It is extremely rare for a position 4 Shaker to ever transition to anything other than being a stunning initiator. Similar to Earth Spirit here, snowballing on this hero means that you're just a bit tankier in fights, so you don't die in your first jump, but the overall impact will be largely unchanged. On the opposite end, if you're underfarmed on Shaker, your impact can be completely stunted. And because of that, he's going to score a 2 in this category. If you struggle getting your first item, you're pretty much just a Fissure, and although Fissure is a great spell, its impact alone isn't enough most of the time. But if you're poor and then spend 1400 on a Shard, your Blink is just going to be even more delayed. And although it's not impossible to play this hero without a Blink, it is very hard to have as high of an impact as you may want. Shaker's utility is easily going to be a 5. This is one of the few position 4 heroes with a teamfight spell so strong it can single-handedly win fights. Following all that up with very long AoE stun chains makes this hero one of a kind and even game warping in some matchups. Shaker is also going to get a 5 for late game usefulness. As games go later on, the time to kill will often become shorter for all heroes, so having access to these long stuns only gets better as games get elongated. Although there is a limit to the amount of items Shaker really needs, he is a great utility item carrier. Things like Octarine Core, Force Staff, and Yule Scepter are all great items going into the late game that Shaker really enjoys buying. In total, Shaker gets a 21, placing him at the very top of B tier.
The worldsmith waits.
ET is another hero that I think gets wrongfully ignored in mid to lower MMR games. In lane, he scores a 3. Most of your spells are actually pretty underwhelming in lane. The way the sleep works from Echo Stomp doesn't do a whole lot in lane, since early game kills more so rely on having enough time during the stun to do damage, rather than being able to position around them. Certain lanes can do gimmicky builds with multiple points of natural order, but for the most part, your lane strength is going to come from the bonus damage from Astral Spirit. If you're allowed to stack side camps and consistently get huge damage off of every cast of the spell, you're going to be in great shape to win the lane through your damage output alone. It is a bit annoying when the enemy does block your camps so you can't stack them, but you still can be quite annoying anyway. His ability to set up kills gets him a 3. This is another weird ranking because on his own, ET really struggles at locking out enemies due to the long cast time on Echo Stomp, but if he does have any kind of setup, Echo Stomp becomes one of the best follow-up stuns in the game due to how long it lasts. In addition, if he is able to land a stomp in any way, Split Earth is almost guaranteed to land and is great at damaging and setting up pickoffs. His snowball strength is going to be a 3. Some people might rank ET much higher in this category than I am here, and I can see the argument for doing that. This hero can theoretically output more right-click damage than anybody else in the game, and just walk around one-shotting enemies if he gets enough damage from Spirit, but the fact is, getting this much damage off of Spirit is extremely inconsistent, combined with the fact that if you want to go right-click items, you kind of have to go all in, and this makes me hesitate ranking him much higher than this. But even ignoring the right-click side of things, if you get a lot of gold on this hero early in the game, you can get some things that improve your quality of life quite a bit. Things like Boots of Bearing, Veil, and Ags are all things that make marginal differences to position 4 ET strength. On the other end, if you end up with little to no farm going into the mid or late game, you may struggle a bit. When underfarmed, ET is going to get a 2. The vast majority of your use in situations like these will be your initial stomp into ult. You're going to struggle staying close enough to enemies to make natural order be a real factor, because with no real defensive tools outside of just stomping in place, most enemy heroes that jump you will result in you dying. The magical part of natural order is centered on your spirit though, so even if you are unable to walk into fights, you can still have your spirit offering that to your team. When looking at utility, ET is going to get a 4. Natural order is such a unique spell that doesn't really have any replacements. So if you have a draft that would benefit from armor or magic resist reduction, ET is going to be irreplaceable in that role. Echo Stomp can be a fight-winning ability when used on multiple enemies, not to mention that it will pretty much guarantee your ult hit on anybody who gets slept. The amount of damage Split Earth can do versus high HP enemies is something that no other position 4 can compare to. All 3 of these spells are completely incredible, but since all of them are unreliable in some regard, I can only give ET a 4 here, since there will still be times where your team just wakes up enemies right away from sleep, causing your ult to miss and making your impact in the fight become almost 0. For late game usefulness, ET gets a 5. His abilities have a bit of an interesting power curve as the game goes on. As enemies are able to get more armor and magic resist or even magic immunity items, his aura becomes far less impactful. But on the other side, having the ability to put multiple enemies to sleep for up to 5 seconds can be fight winning if used in the right situations. On top of that, with Split Earth being a % based damage ability, it scales phenomenally into the late game. And finally, late game team fights tend to be a bit more hectic, potentially resulting in ET being able to get huge damage from Astral Spirit and doing a lot of right click damage. In total, ET scores a 20 and ends up in the B tier.
This Fawn's afternoon is looking up.
For lane strength, Ench is going to get a 4. She has amazing harass and good kill potential in most lanes. Impetus and Enchant give her great foundation for making aggressive plays early on. On top of that, Enchant being able to dispel is a fantastic tool in certain niche scenarios. The ability to take over creeps, while not being as strong as it used to be, is still a significant boost to your lane's damage. Unfortunately, Ench's low base durability makes her potentially very weak into enemy lanes that have more aggression than you do. Her ability to set up kills is going to net her a 2. Enchant slow and her ability to take over creep that's suitable for ganking, like a Mud Golem or Centaur, gives her some tools to do well in this category, but the stuns for both of these creeps are some of the easiest to avoid in the game, making her struggle at doing anything against enemies with any mobility. She does have the luxury of being able to walk into parts of the map that most supports can't, due to her high durability once her ult and her heal come online, but normally you'll have a few heroes in other roles that are better suited for that job than you are. Ench's snowball strength is going to be a 4. This hero's scaling is very straightforward. The way you play this game on this hero is pretty much identical whether or not you have a lot of farm. The main thing that changes is the amount of damage that you're going to be outputting with Impetus, and maybe having access to another defensive item which can keep you alive against some counters. It's pretty easy for this hero to turn into someone that can output an unexpected amount of damage in fights and become a huge threat to enemy heroes. There have been a lot of times in the past where this hero has even been played as a core just because of this fact. And although the direction this hero is headed in is taking her further away from that playstyle, if you have money, it can still come up. While underfarmed, Ench is going to get a 2. Like I said before, the amount of money you have doesn't really change much in terms of what Ench wants to do in the game, but there is a bit of a problem when you fall behind enough. You do rely on a bit of a gimmick and untouchable to stay alive in fights, and this is an ability that can only do so much. If you're behind enough to get killed in only 1 or 2 hits, it's not going to be enough to save you from being blown up as soon as you show up. Her utility is going to be a 2. Between her heal, ability to take over creeps, slow, and dispel, she has a variety of things that can fall into this category. The problem is that none of them are that high impact in most games past the early game. The heal will always be nice, but the slow and dispel are very easy to play around, especially compared to the utility of most other 4s on this list. Her late game usefulness is going to be a 3. Being an above average 4 in terms of durability and damage goes a long way here. The big problem is how little Ench can do against BKBs. And when that is an item that almost every hero will have when the games go late enough, you're gonna struggle. Outside of fights, you do have a bit more that you could do on the map than other 4s, so it's not all bad. In total, Ench scores a 17 and rounds out today's list with a C. On screen now is the final results for today's rankings. If you want the chart with the breakdowns of all of today's rankings, it will be posted in my Discord, which is linked below. Leave all of your thoughts and opinions on any of these rankings in the comments. If you want to watch the previous videos of me ranking every carry in the game, those will be on screen now. That's all I got.